The idea of choice is heavily deconstructed in all three films, particularly in the second and third. We see several characters throughout the film bound by some telos, fate, or ideal, regardless of whether they are human, machines, or sentient programs. The film makes the case that fate and choice are somewhat preordained by a plethora of things and is not as clear-cut as one might readily think. Agent Smith. Smith is someone whom is bound by a sense of purpose or telos. His objective is to overwrite and spread everywhere like the parasite he compared human existence to. He even says that we are not free, as purpose is almost everything and essential to existence. Smith also is a manifestation of inevitability, hence the famous line of his, claiming that no matter what resistance he faces, he is inevitable and Neo cannot stop him. He is infinitely recurring and re-emerging. He ends up being inevitable towards the end because no matter how much Neo chooses to fight, it is futile, which is also why in the final fight he questions the motivations and reasons for Neo wanting to fight him, pointing out how meaningless his motivations or reasons are. But to what extent was Smith free? It seems that his ultimate telos of spreading everywhere led to his downfall. He even mistrusted his own visions of how things would end, indicating that he wanted to win against Neo, but had no choice but to be unintentionally complicit in his own demise, thus removing a layer of choice and agency from himself. Ergo, Smith had no choice but to merge, return to the source with Neo's code, and thus be eliminated from existence. By defeating Neo, he will essentially be defeating himself, as we already know Smith is Neo's opposite, as some part of code was imprinted onto him following the events of the first film. Architect. The Architect also shows how problematic choice is. In subsequent versions of The Matrix that were more successful, he had to present choice for the human subjects in order for humans to accept the illusory world of The Matrix's reality, even if they were only aware of it at a mere subconscious level. But this choice also led to the emergence of a growing population of people that rejected it, hence the cyclical nature of Zion and the need to reload The Matrix. But the most interesting thing demonstrating choice being deconstructed was that before Neo picks one of two doors, the Architect already knows the answer by merely observing the physiological changes in Neo when presented with the options. This again shows how choice can be automatic and almost biological. Neo did not choose to save humanity and restart Zion, as his circumstances were unique in that he was in love with Trinity, Oracle. In all scenes with the Oracle, we see that the mechanism of choice is still very much a mystery.
Sit down, but you're not going to anyway. And don't worry about the vase.
What vase?
That vase.
I'm sorry.
I said don't worry about it. I'll get one of my kids to fix it.
How did you know?
Oh, what's really going to bake your noodle later on is, would you still have broken it if I hadn't said anything?
The Oracle says that our choices have already been made and that we are trying to unpack and unravel why we made those choices. It's a rejection to the school of thought that says choice and all of its underpinnings is strictly within the mind, which is a rather one-dimensional view of things. Not to sound like Sam Harris, but the mechanics of how and why we choose is also rooted on an environmental and physiological level. There are a plethora of internal and external things dictating and influencing the choices we make. For Neo, the overriding emotion was love, which is why we choose to risk human survival and save the love of his life, rejecting the Messiah status and figuring out how to save Zion later. But we also learned that the mother of the Matrix, originally a machine program tasked to understand the human psyche, made big choices herself, specifically choosing to aid the humans in their cause to end the war, not because she knew the outcome, but because she had hope and belief that such an end can be attained peacefully. Then again, what other choice did the Oracle have? She too is a machine program, and to not help Neo would mean the end of both the machines and the human race. So what we learn about the Oracle is that she can already see choices people will make, but not what actually happens in the future, which is interesting because it shows she actually is not an Oracle, but someone who understands the mechanics of choice almost instantly.
Why don't you come and have a sit this time?
Maybe I'll stand.
Well, suit yourself.
I felt like sitting.
I know. Candy?
You all already know if I'm going to take it?
Wouldn't be much of an oracle if I didn't.
But if you already know, how can I make a choice?
Because you didn't come here to make the choice. You've already made it. You're here to try to understand why you made it.
Merovingian. Once again, Merovingian thinks the mechanics of the world is rooted in cause and effect. He thinks choice is an illusion and irrelevant in the pursuit of obtaining power. He explains how it governs everything and is a character that contributes to the undermining and deconstruction of the idea of choice and its influence on one's own fate. Notice how choiceless Trinity, Morpheus, and Seraphim really are when attempting to rescue Neo in the third. Love has all but reduced Trinity's choice to risking death, taking on unfavorable odds to get Neo back.
Do you believe in fate, Neo?
No,
Why not?
because I don't like the idea that I'm not in control of my life.
I know exactly what you mean.
To what extent did Neo really have a choice in the matter when the architect gave him the option of choosing between saving humanity and restarting Zion, or saving Trinity and dooming humanity to its destruction? Before he even walked to the door, the architect knew what his choice was by observing physiological changes. The second Matrix deconstructs choice through Neo and his interaction with others. Take the scene with the Chancellor, who observes that humans do not have much of a choice or control over machines carrying out essential everyday things, prompting reflection on how dependent and choiceless we really are in our reliance on complicated automotive mechanisms. Before Neo even sits down at the bench next to the Oracle in the belly brawl scene, or accepts candy from her, the choice has already been made with little understanding on how or why. Did Neo really have control over the ultimate outcome of the trilogy? In the end, he had to merge with Smith in order to get them returned to the source. It was the only way to end the war between the humans and the machines, the alternative being much worse. In the final fight, choice nevertheless is still important though, even if its mechanics and what dictates and influence it is not yet fully understood. If Neo did not choose to surrender, then it would have meant the end of everything. But then to what extent does Neo and Smith have agency over the outcome? The answer is not given to us by the movies, but it does play around with and deconstructs the notion of choice, choicelessness, and free will. We see several characters bound by ideals, philosophies, telos, and emotions. Even programs like the Keymaker, whom has firmly identified with his ultimate purpose and is content with it. So to conclude, remember what Smith said, "We are not here because we are free, we are here because we are not free." How does a deconstruction of choice make us feel? Uncomfortable or reassured? Is the idea that control over one's own fate being wholly illusory something the Matrix adequately convey? That is for you to decide. There are plenty more reasons for and against such things in the movies, but it's discussions like this that makes the Matrix what it is, and why it is a thoroughly enjoyable movie to those that like to think big. But when rewatching the movies, pay close attention to the choices the main characters make or are presented with, and observe whether their choices really change things.